Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Nazir. We are up to Perek Bet, Mishna Dalid. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha, Israel, Chana bat Miriam, and Sason ben Raya, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim lechaim, v'derefua shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, betoch shah Cholei Israel. The Mishnah discusses three cases where a person accepts only some of the Nazir prohibitions. The first case, Harini Nazir al menat shehesh shoteyain. If someone says, I'm hereby a Nazir on condition that I will be permitted to drink wine, umitameh lametim, or he declares, I am a Nazir on condition that I will be allowed to become tameh from the dead. Hareza Nazir, he is a Nazir. V'asu bechulan, and is forbidden in all the Nazir prohibitions, including drinking wine and becoming tameh. His condition does not take effect because it is contrary to what is written in the Torah that a Nazir may not drink wine or become tameh. A condition that is contrary to the laws of the Torah is not binding. Therefore, if a person attaches a condition contrary to the Torah to some legal action, that action takes effect even though the condition is not fulfilled. For this reason, a person cannot make a condition that he will keep only some of the Nazir restrictions. The same applies if a person accepts Nazirut on condition that he is allowed to cut his hair. The second case, Yodea ani sheyesh Nazirut, if someone says, I am hereby a Nazir, and then says, I know that there is a Nazirut that forbids Tuman cutting hair, aval eni Yodea she'Nazir asur biyayin, but I did not know that a Nazir is forbidden to drink wine, so I never intended to accept Nazirut from wine. Hareze asur, he is nevertheless forbidden to drink wine like any Nazir. Since he accepted some of the Nazir prohibitions, he becomes a full Nazir and is forbidden in all of them, as we learned in chapter 1, Mishnah 2. The Rabbi Shimon matir, but Rabbi Shimon permits him to have wine. In Rabbi Shimon's view, since he did not accept all of the Nazirut prohibitions, he actually does not become a Nazir at all. Nevertheless, Rabbi Shimon agrees that the vow in the first case of the Mishnah is binding, although he stipulated not to keep all of the Nazir restrictions. In that case, when a person declared, I am hereby a Nazir, he accepted upon himself a full Nazirut, except that he wished to make it subject to a condition. So his acceptance of the Nazirut stands, while the condition he attached to it does not, since it is a condition that contradicts the law of the Torah. He is therefore a full Nazir and is forbidden to drink wine. But in the second case, however, the person did not realize that Nazirut forbids wine. Since it is clear that he never meant to include his prohibition in his vow, Rabbi Shimon considers the vow to be ineffective. The same is true in chapter 1, Mishnah 2, where the basic declaration itself excluded some of the prohibitions. Now the third case is about a person who cannot fulfill his Nazirut. The rabbis ruled that if a person makes a vow that he cannot fulfill, it is void. The Mishnah in Nedarim, chapter 3, Mishnah 1, lists 4 kinds of vows that do not take effect because it is clear that the person did not really intend for them to take effect. One of them is Nidre Onasim, Onsim, vows of 4 circumstances, a vow that a person cannot fulfill. The Mishnah cites a dispute about what void means. Yodea Nisha Nazir asur biyayin, if someone declares I'm hereby a Nazir and then says I knew when I vowed to be a Nazir that a Nazir is forbidden wine, but I thought that the rabbis would permit it for me because I cannot live without wine. Or he says, I thought they would permit me to become tameh from the dead because I bury the dead for a living. Meaning in these cases it is practically impossible for him to fully keep his vow of Nazirut. Hareze mutar, he is permitted in all the Nazir restrictions because he is not a Nazir. In the view of this Tana, a vow that a person cannot fulfill is automatically void, even without asking a sage to annul it. The Rabbi Shimon Noser, but Rabbi Shimon prohibits him in all the Nazir restrictions because he considers him a Nazir unless he asks a sage to annul his vow. According to Rabbi Shimon, such a vow is void only if a sage annuls it. His assumption that the sages will permit him to drink wine or bury the dead because it is difficult for him to avoid these activities is grounds for annulment, but the vow is not actually void until a sage annuls it. This is true according to Rabbi Shimon, not only in the case of Nazirut, but in any vow of forced circumstances. And the Rav does tell us, the halakha does not follow Rabbi Shimon in any of the cases, in these 2 cases in the Mishnah. That is the end of Mishnah Dalid. Mishnah discusses a person who takes upon himself 2 obligations, 1 to be a Nazir, and 2 to provide some other Nazir with the offerings he needs at the end of his term. As we have learned several times, when a Nazir's term ends, he must shave his head and bring 3 offerings, as we will see in chapter 6, Mishnah 7. So the Mishnah begins, Hareni Nazir v'alai legalech Nazir. If someone says, I am hereby a Nazir, and I also take upon myself to shave a Nazir, meaning to provide the offerings for another Nazir to be able to conclude his Nazirut and to shave his head. Since the Nazir shaves his head when the offerings are brought, the Mishnah refers to bringing the offerings simply as shaving a Nazir. V'shama chavero v'amar, and his friend heard him and said, V'ani v'alai legalech Nazir, and I too take upon myself to shave a Nazir, meaning I am also a Nazir like him, and I too take upon myself to shave a Nazir. Im ayu pikchim, if they are clever and want to minimize their expenses, migalchim zeh, each one shaves the other, meaning each one provides the other one with the offering he needs to shave his head. Reuven, who made his declaration first, supplies the offerings for Shimon, and Shimon, who declared, and I, supplies Reuven. This fulfills Reuven's vow to provide Nazir with offerings, even though Shimon was not yet a Nazir when Reuven made his declaration. We do not assume that Reuven meant that he would supply only someone who was already a Nazir at the time of his declaration. This way, each of them has to pay for only one set of Nazir offerings. Vimlav, but if they are not clever and each one brought offerings for his own Nazirut, Migalchim Nazirim Achrim, then they must each shave and provide offerings, meaning provide offerings for other Nazirim in order to fulfill the second half of their vows. So at the end of the day, each one will have supplied two sets of offerings, one for himself and one for another Nazir. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.